Hello everyone. The topic today we will discuss is from jurisprudence, administration of justice. Administration of justice meaning kinds and objectives, which is coming under unit 3 of jurisprudence, 4th semester. Now, administration of justice. The first point we will discuss here is protection and enforcement of rights and duties according to law. Now, earlier, the societies were based on vengeance, or we can say the societies were based on revenge. Okay, so the justice delivery system, it was weak, and it is quite obvious also. The administration of justice is the modern and civilized substitute, or we can say administration of justice is the modern and a very civilized alternative for the primitive practice of private vengeance or private revenge and violent self-help. Now, when we talk about private vengeance or private revenge, let us talk about the might is right policy. Like, for example, if there was a fight between two primitive persons, so we are talking here about the primitive society, okay? Suppose there was a fight between two primitive persons for a, let's say, for a piece of land. The might is right policy, it was applicable. That is, one who is having the power, one who is having the might, the property belongs to that person. Now, violent self-help, it was nothing but it was a, we can say, protective attitude to protect oneself from the brutal attacks from others. At that time, there was no concept of state, or we can say the concept of state, it was not there. The concept of state, it did not dawn upon the minds of the primitive people. And as we evolved psychologically, I call it psychological evolution, as we evolved psychologically, as there was a psychological evolution, the need for the formation of the state came into existence, it came into being. So the state became a civilized substitute or a civilized alternative for the primitive society, because a state contains its own administration of justice. A state contains its own administration of justice. For example, the policy of might is right will always violate the rights of others, and we can take this for granted. So, to protect the people from injustice, a state is having what? A state is having justice mechanism to protect the rights of the people, to protect the rights of the citizens, and at the same time to enforce the duties according to the law or as per the law. So, for example, this is just an example I am citing here. If somebody attacks a person, the person who has been attacked or the aggrieved person or the victim will get justice as per the law of the state or as per the laws of the state, laws of the land. And what was the duty of the person who attacked? What was the duty of the offender here? His duty was not to violate the rights of the person, okay, of the victim. So, to render justice to the attacked person or to render justice to the victim or the aggrieved person, a state is having what? It is having established courts and existing laws, okay, to render justice, okay. A state is having what? Established courts and existing laws. So, such matters are to be adjudicated where? Such matters are to be adjudicated in established courts, okay. And such laws in a state must be enforced or we can say are enforced for the benefit of the whole society. So just now we have discussed about a vital point we have discussed, and that point was adjudication in courts and enforcement by force for benefit of society or for the benefit of the whole society. So as we know, the law has been divided into two categories or into two groups, civil and criminal. So there are separate courts created within the state for adjudicating civil and criminal matters. So we can say there are 2 points or groups or categories into which law is divided, civil and criminal, and there are separate courts for civil matters and separate courts for criminal matters. Okay, so before just going into this, let us little bit discuss about the concept of justice. Okay, the concept of justice. So as we are talking about this administration of justice, let us talk about little bit about the concept of justice. Now the concept of justice is as old as origin and growth of human society itself. There is no doubt regarding this, and the social nature of man demands that he or she must live peacefully in society. While living so, he experiences a conflict of interest and expects rightful conduct on the part of others. This is the reason why Salmond and Roscoe Pound have emphasized the importance of justice in their definitions of law. Now, according to Blackstone, Blackstone Dictionary, Blackstone. So, justice is nothing but it is a reservoir. Justice is a reservoir from where the concept of right and equity evolves. The concept of right and equity evolves. Now, what is equity? Equity means the quality of being fair and impartial. Equity means nothing but the quality of being fair and impartial. So Blackstone, according to Blackstone, justice is a reservoir from where the concept of right we know, duty we also know, and equity evolves. Equity means the quality of being fair and impartial. Okay, and Salmond here gives another definition of the term. Okay, that is administration of justice. According to Salmond, administration of justice is, or Salmond defines administration of justice as the process of maintaining justice within a political community. As the process of maintaining justice within a political community by means of the physical force of the state. So this is what Salmond had to say regarding administration of justice. Okay, administration of justice. Now, the modern version of the concept of justice is expressed in terms of justice according to law. Okay, so this is the modern version of the concept of justice, which Dicey, he was a very famous jurist, which Dicey has called the rule of law. This presupposes that law and justice apply to all alike without any differentiation whatsoever. That is, no one is above law. No one is above law. From this point of view, he considers it unnecessary to distinguish between civil and criminal justice and treats them as violations of public justice. So this is what Dicey had to say. Okay, rule of law. According to Dicey, rule of law. So as we have discussed, there are two categories into which law is divided, civil and criminal, and there are separate courts for civil matters and separate courts for the criminal matters. So, for example, we can give the example of civil courts, like on district level there are district courts or district judge, and criminal courts such as court of session or what we call sessions court. These are some of the examples. We already know about all this. Okay, so there are different procedures also. Okay, so there are different procedures also. Like for example, for civil cases we are having what? Civil procedure code, CPC we are having, and for criminal cases we are having criminal procedure code, CRPC. Even the nature of punishments are also different. Civil courts are having different approaches while dealing with cases, and criminal courts are having their own approaches, and this is quite obvious. Like in civil judgment there are damages or recovery, compensation, enforcement of contract is also there. So if when a contract is breached, then only. In criminal judgment, by and large, it is all about physical punishment, like let's say physical confinement for 2 years or 10 years. Okay, so there are penal provisions also, but the punishments which are financial are not retributive in nature. Okay, now retributive approach requires the response to a crime is always proportional to the offense. But a person, let's say, who has been murdered, how come that person can be compensated? The person already died. So whatever money may be paid for the compensation of murder, by money the death cannot be compensated. So we can say financial punishments cannot be retributive in nature. Financial punishment cannot be retributive in nature. Okay, we can say. Now let us come to civil justice now. Okay, we will discuss about civil justice here. So civil justice deals with the enforcement of right, which may be primary or sanctioning. A sanctioning right is one which arises out of the violation of another's right. All others are primary. So civil justice in a very simple language, civil justice deals with the enforcement of right. It deals with the enforcement of right which may be primary or sanctioning. So civil justice, it deals with what? It deals with the enforcement of right. And civil justice can be further divided into 2 points or 2 groups: primary and sanctioning rights. That is, primary rights and sanctioning rights. Sanctioning rights, it is also known as remedial right. Okay, sanctioning rights, these are also known as remedial right. So primary right, civil justice is divided into 2 groups or into 2 points. Let's say 2 points: primary right and sanctioning right. Sanctioning right, it is also known as remedial right. Okay, so let us come to primary rights or primary right. Now primary rights are those rights which do not have the violation of another right. I am repeating this again. Primary rights are those rights which do not have the violation of another right. I will simplify it. For example, I am citing one example here. For example, your right not to be libeled. Okay, your right not to be libeled or let's say assaulted. Okay, so what is libel? Okay, libel means defaming someone by publishing. Okay, like publishing in a newspaper. So this is libel. Okay, so for example, your right not to be libeled or assaulted is what? Is a primary right. Libel, as you know, is mainly caused because of defamation through publication, like in newspaper, nowadays websites, different websites are there, etc. So not to be libeled or assaulted is your primary right. Okay, now let us come to sanctioning or remedial right. Sanctioning or remedial right is that right which arises out of the violation of another right. I am repeating this again. Sanctioning or remedial right is that right which arises out of the violation of another right. That is, when the primary right is violated, the remedial or sanctioning rights come into being or comes into existence. I am repeating this again. When the primary right is violated, the remedial or sanctioning right, it comes into being, it comes into existence. Like for example, let me cite one example to simplify it. Like for example, your right to not to be libeled or assaulted is a primary right. But when your primary right is violated in this, suppose you have been libeled, suppose you have been defamed, your right to obtain pecuniary or pecuniary compensation, or we can say financial compensation on being defamed or libeled by some other person is what? Is a sanctioning or remedial right. So you are getting here remedy through financial compensation, and that is why sanctioning right is also known as remedial right of yours. Okay. Another example is a right to fulfillment of a contract. A right to fulfillment of a contract is what? Is a primary right. A right to fulfillment of a contract is nothing but a primary right. But right to recover damages for its breach, for the breach of contract, is a sanctioning right. So this is a very easy example which I have cited. Now, let us come to enforcement of rights in civil justice. Okay, we will discuss about enforcement of rights in civil justice. Okay, now this enforcement of rights in civil justice can be divided into 2 points: specific performance, which is also known as specific enforcement, and number 2, sanctional enforcement. The first point is specific performance, which is also known as specific enforcement. The second point is sanctional enforcement. Sanctional enforcement. Now, sanctional enforcement can be further divided into 2 points. Sanctional enforcement. First one, compensation or restitution. Restitution. The first point is compensation or restitution. And the second point, penalty or penal redress. Penalty or penal redress. I am repeating this again. Okay. So we are talking here about, we are talking now about enforcement of rights in civil justice. Enforcement of rights in civil justice. The first point here is specific performance, or we can say specific enforcement. The second point is sanctional enforcement. Now, sanctional enforcement can be further divided into 2 points: A, compensation or restitution; B, penalty or penal redress. Okay, penalty or penal redress. Now, what is specific performance? Specific performance is for the enforcement of primary rights. Specific performance is for the enforcement of primary rights. And sanctional enforcement, if we simplify it, is for the enforcement of sanctioning or remedial right. Okay. So let us come to this specific enforcement. Now, what is specific enforcement? Specific enforcement or specific performance is for the enforcement of primary rights. Okay, it's for the enforcement of primary rights. Now, specific enforcement. The first one is specific enforcement or specific performance. The law's priority is what? Is the enforcement of primary right. Is the enforcement of primary right when possible, like paying of the debt, let's say. The law's first priority is the enforcement of primary right, where it is possible or where it is ethical or where there is no, let's say, where there is no fundamental flaw. The law will try so that your primary right will get enforced. Like if you want to recover any money, so first by specific enforcement or specific performance in civil law, it will be, the law will try so that you may get your own primary right. The law will try so that you may get your own primary right. Okay. So this is all about specific enforcement or specific performance. Then let us come to sanctional enforcement here. Sanctional enforcement, as we have discussed, is for the enforcement of sanctioning or remedial right. Sanctioning or remedial right. Now, sanctional enforcement is further divided into 2 points: compensation or restitution, and B, penalty or penal redress. So, sanction and enforcement, it is further divided into 2 points: A, compensation or restitution; B, penalty or penal redress. Okay. Now, compensation or restitution. Where your previous contractual loss cannot be fulfilled, or let's say it is not proper to do it. Like, for example, if there is an, let me simplify it. Like, for example, if there is an agreement of a person regarding, let's say, marriage with a lady, and later on the lady say that she don't want to marry, then maybe the right way is not to go for specific enforcement by forcefully compelling the lady to do the marriage. So, on many of such occasions, you get compensation or restitution. Okay? On many such occasions, people get compensation or restitution, which means how much damage you may have faced. Okay? That must be compensated. Now, let's say if your car is broken by someone and that cannot be repaired, suppose, then you may get the compensation, a financial compensation, or maybe compensated to the new car. Okay, you may get the financial compensation, or may be compensated to the new car. And restitution, it means the old stage in which you were, in that stage you will be taken. I am repeating this again. Restitution means nothing but it means the old stage in which you were in the old stage, and in that stage you will be taken again. You will be brought to the old stage again. Now let me cite one example. Like, for example, there was a loss of 1 lakh rupees. Okay. So 1 lakh here is paid. For 1 lakh rupees, 1 lakh here is paid. Okay. For the loss of 1 lakh rupees, 1 lakh rupees is paid. So this is what restitution is all about. Now let us come to the second point of sanctional enforcement, that is penalty or penal redress. Penalty or penal redress. Now, penalty or penal redress. Let's say, so if the violation is intentional, okay, let's say, or if the violation is much severe in nature, then the law will try so that penalty may be rendered to the violator. I am simplifying it again, okay? I will give one example here. If the violation is what? Is intentional, or if the violation is, let's say, much severe in nature, then the law will try so that penalty may be rendered to the violator, okay? Or to the offender. Let's not talk about offender, as we are talking about the civil justice here, the violator, okay? Let's say violator. So let me cite one example here, okay? Let me cite one example. A, B, the same old story here, okay? A took money from B. B is the aggrieved party here, okay? B is the aggrieved party here. So if A took money from B and A did not give the money to B, and at the same time A denied such transaction, then B may get the money from A by the order of the competent court. To get the money through penalty, and at the same time penal redress to pay the compensation can be imposed on whom? On A. Suppose A took 1 lakh rupees from B and refused to pay it back. Then the competent court may order not only to return 1 lakh rupees to B, but at the same time as penal redress, to meet the damages faced by B, more extra money to be paid by A can be ordered by the competent court. So the extra fine here is the penal redress. Okay, so the extra fine here is the penal redress. So in this example, we have, in the first stage we have talked about penalty, and the second stage we have talked about penal redress. Okay. Now let us come to criminal justice. So what is criminal justice? Criminal justice, it means punishment is one of the chief objects of the administration of criminal justice. Punishment is one of the chief objects of the administration of criminal justice. It can be defined as authoritative infliction of suffering and offense. For this, it is necessary that the punishment should be imposed by someone in authority. For this, it is always necessary that the punishment should be imposed by someone always in authority. Now, let's come to this criminal justice here. Now, theories of punishment. Okay, theories of punishment. There are various theories as far as there are various theories in criminal justice as far as criminal justice is concerned. So, theories of punishment. The first approach, there are two approaches here when it comes to theories of punishment. Okay, two approaches are there. So we are talking here about the approaches. The first approach is, number one, the sociological approach, and the second approach is the moral approach. Okay, so you can write two approaches of criminal justice here. Two approaches of criminal justice. First one is sociological approach, the second one is moral approach. Now, in the sociological approach, it has been observed that the punishment has been seen from the perspective of the society. Okay, it has been observed from the perspective of the society, the punishment. So what type of punishment can be given which will render benefit to the society, or the punishment by which much harm is not caused to the society? Like we have juvenile justice, let's say Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015 we are having. Like for example, the maximum tenure of punishment which can be given to the juvenile offenders is 3 years, and this punishment is valid for heinous crimes also. Okay, like we have this particular act, Juvenile Justice Act 2015 we are having. So it is reformative in nature, we can say reformative, or it is about reformation. Okay, it is about reformation or reformative in nature. So we can say the punishments given by the law are not for revengeful acts. It is not for vengeance. Okay, but reformative elements must be there. Reformative elements must be there to reform the person ultimately. Like in this example, we have given the example of the juvenile justice. Okay. Now let us come to the moral approach. As we are discussing about two approaches of civil justice, the first one was social approach, the second one is moral approach. So the basic thing which we have discussed in the class about morality is that it is not absolute in nature. We have already discussed in the class that morality is not something absolute in nature. It is always relative. That is, what is morality for you, it may not be morality for me. But from the perspective of criminal justice, morality is very important. Like for example, let me cite one example here. If a person steals jewelry, let's say, okay, jewelry, it cannot be dealt with an attitude of eye for an eye, or revenge will not be applicable here. Vengeance will not be applicable here. Now we know stealing is an immoral act. From the perspective of law, it is an immoral act. It is an illegal act. And the law is there to punish the person who has stolen the jewelry. Okay? Thus, in this way, restoring the morality in the society, it is done. But sometimes various circumstances may be involved here behind stealing. Like that, let's say that person may be a poor fellow who, for feeding her children, has stolen the jewelry or money. So, morality says stealing is immoral. But in such cases, whether morality can be imposed by law in an absolute way, or a more flexible approach is needed. These are some of the vital questions. So I will here keep this argument to be decided by your individual conscience. Okay. Now let's little bit talk about criminal justice in ancient India. Okay, criminal justice in ancient India, as we are talking about criminal justice now. Now the main purpose of administration of criminal justice has always been to punish the offender. Okay, so it is the state which punishes the criminals. The state here is very important. Punishment, necessarily it implies some kind of pain inflicted upon the offender, or let's say a loss caused to him for his criminal act, which may either be intended to deter him from repeating that particular offense, or maybe an expression of society's disapprobation, okay, for his antisocial conduct. Or it may be also be directed to reform and regenerate him, and at the same time protect the society from lawbreakers. Whatever may be the end of criminal justice, the fact remains that the importance of punishment has been recognized even under the ancient legal systems of the world for the protection and welfare of the state and its people and its citizens. Now, according to Manu, like Manu Smriti we are having, Danda or Dand or Dondo was the essential characteristic of law. So Danda was the essential characteristic of law in Manu Smriti. He argued that is Manu argued that punishment keeps the people under control, protects them, and it remains awake when people are asleep. So the wise have recognized punishment itself as a form of dharma. Okay. Now the concept of dharma governed Hindu life. It is governing Hindu life ever since the Vedic age. We all know about this particular thing. We all know about dharma a little bit, or maybe more. And everyone from the king down to the common man was supposed to follow it. Now Kautilya's Arthashastra, it contained an elaborate account of economic, political and legal administration in the 4th century BC. It describes in detail the procedure to be followed by courts for dispensation of justice, both civil and criminal. Okay, both civil and criminal. The emphasis was mainly on the rationality of punishment. How much rational the punishment is. The king could commute the sentence of the accused if he confessed his guilt or showed repentance for his offense. The witness indulging in false deposition was punished as if he himself had committed the said offense. Now, the Arthashastra, it mentions an exhaustive list of offenses and the fines charged for committing them. Now, there is one interesting thing. One peculiar feature of the of the ancient Hindu legal system was that punishment varied according to the offender's caste or social position, and it was increasingly severe if the offender belonged to the higher caste varna. Okay, when the judge faltered in proper dispensation of justice and wrongly punished the offender, he could himself be punished. The judge himself could be punished. Okay, so a person have damaging trees, plants, or forest, etc., could be doubly fined. Okay, and then with the advent of Mughal rules in the medieval period, the ancient criminal justice in India, it was replaced by their own system, which in turn was replaced by the the Mughal rule. It was replaced by the British model upon which the modern criminal justice system is based. So this is what criminal justice in ancient India it is all about. So we have discussed about two approaches of criminal justice. The first one is sociological approach, the second one is moral approach. Now let us discuss about the various theories of punishment. Various theories of punishment. So there are various theories, like for example we are having the preventive theory, we are having then deterrent theory, then we are having reformative theory and retributive theory, and so many theories are there. We will discuss expiatory theory. So let us start from preventive theory. Preventive theory. So the first point to be discussed here is disable or preventing offender. Disable or preventing offender, so that the offender can be prevented or disabled, so that he may not do such type of criminal act again. Okay. Now, apart from punishment, in this particular preventive theory, there are forfeiture of office, cancellation of license, physical restraint. These things are also included in the preventive theory. If you put a person according to this theory, let's say for 10 years, for 10 years, such type of crime will not be committed by that person. Okay, this is quite obvious. Okay, using our common sense we can understand. So if or she was an office holder, let's say he or she was an office holder, the person who committed the crime, the office position will be taken from that person, or to suspend the person or cancellation of the term of office, these actions can be taken. Like for example, if the person was a, let's say, practicing doctor who committed the crime, then the practicing right here can be cancelled. Likewise, driving license can be cancelled of the offender. So whatever position the person he or she was holding before committing the crime, that position has been removed here. This is the preventive theory. Now there are certain criticisms also of this particular theory. Now the first criticism is crimes under extraordinary circumstances. Punishment only hardens. So this is the first point. Okay, these are some of the criticisms as far as preventive theory is concerned. So let's say if a person committed theft, the person cannot be hanged, okay, for committing theft. Penal provisions are there. The person can be kept in prison for a certain time, let's say 2 years or even more maybe. But we are not here seeing why that person committed the crime. This is the most vital thing to be discussed. We are not here seeing why that person committed the crime. Perhaps that person was so poor that that person could not feed his family, feed his children, so he committed the theft. This might be one of the reasons, one of the vital reasons. If this person is punished, then there might be case that the person may become more hardcore thief or more hardcore criminal. So here the reformative approach has not been followed in the preventive theory. By confining the person, how much reformation or change can be brought in that person? This is the vital question that we should put before ourselves. Second criticism is about humanistic punishment and dislike for death penalty or capital punishment. So if we see the humanistic approach, okay, it is absent in this preventive theory. If a person has committed a heinous crime, that person may be given death penalty. But whether death penalty or capital punishment is the solution, whether it is a solution, if the person is hanged, it means what? It means such type of crime from that person has been prevented or it has been stopped. Whether capital punishment is giving a real solution. Nowadays we talk about right to life. We talk a great deal about Article 21, right to life, one of the fundamental rights. But whether right to life includes right to take away life. So there are so many debates going on. So from the perspective of humanistic concept, the preventive theory is not having the elements of reformistic approaches. It is only talking about prevention, either be it in the form of confinement, which may be a lifetime confinement also, or by preventing that person from further doing the crime by imposing death penalty. Okay. So this was preventive theory. Now let us come to the deterrent theory. The first point we will discuss as far as deterrent theory is concerned, make example of wrongdoer. Make example of wrongdoer. So if I simplify it, deterrent theory, it simply means to create fear about committing such crime in minds of the mass or of the people, in the minds of the people. It is also about creating the awareness of dire consequences which a wrongdoer will face if such type of crime is committed. So in this way, by creating fear in the minds of the people about the wrongdoing or about the crime, it is setting an example, or we can say it is setting a fearful example to the society. Like in some religious nations, I don't want to name any religion here, like in some religious nations, public weeping is encouraged. Wrongdoer is punished publicly. And this is the example of a deterrent theory. Public weeping is encouraged there, and the wrongdoer is punished publicly. This is the example of deterrent theory. Now there are certain criticisms. The first point is crime under heat of the moment. No time to think of consequences. The second point to be discussed, hardening by harsh punishment. So these are some of the criticisms. So there are circumstances when a crime is committed in the heat of the moment. We call it heat of the moment. The person who committed the crime did not do it with a pre-plan, but it happened, like for example, suddenly, let's say due to a controversial conversation among some people, among some let's say friends. So out of anger, what happened? The person injured another person, and the other person died. So in such cases, how come the deterrent theory can be applied, as the person who committed the crime did it without any criminal pre-planning? But instead of reforming the person, if this person is let's say publicly punished, what example it will give to the society? That person, let's say he was having a very well reputed background, but the whole thing happened suddenly, what we call in the heat of the moment. Everything happened, the whole incident happened suddenly. So he had no time to think about the consequences. He had no time to think of the consequences. And deterrent theory is also talking about what? It is also talking about the dire consequences which will be faced by the wrongdoer when the crime will be committed. But here, as it is a heat of the moment case, the person had no time to think about the consequences of such crime. Moreover, by persecuting such person, let's say in public place, will set a fearful psychological trauma. It will set a fearful psychological trauma in the minds of the common people, especially nowadays in the modern time when we people talk about child psychology nowadays. Okay, so without reforming the offender, such deterrent theory or deterrent approach will make the offender more harsh to do such crimes, or more harsher crimes in the future will be committed by that person. Okay, so this is what deterrent theory is all about. Okay, this is a very simple example of the term deterrent theory. So the third point to be discussed, reformative theory. Okay, so what are the points that we will discuss here? Crime is disease of person, of society. Crime is disease of person, and it is also the disease of the society. We will talk about personality of offender, social factors, rehabilitate, not revenge, attention to criminal, not crime, punishment to educate and discipline criminal. So these are some of the points that we will discuss as far as reformative theory is concerned. I will simplify it. Don't worry. So this theory is talking about crime as a disease. Crime as a disease of person, and it is also at the same time disease of the society. So for example, let's say the offender is having some, let's say, psychological disease, and she committed the crime. Let's say she committed murder. So earlier the focus was mainly on the crime. Earlier the focus, it was mainly on the crime, it was not on the criminal. But in reformative theory, the focus here is the criminal. Okay, like here it will be seen whether the offender is really going through a psychological disease or a psychological trauma or not. Okay, like here it will be seen whether the offender is really going through a psychological disease or a psychological trauma. So as we have discussed earlier, the focus was mainly on the crime, not on the criminal. Okay, now in the reformative theory, the attention is given to the criminal, not crime. Okay, so such things will be considered. So this theory is also seen from the perspective of juvenile justice. When a minor has committed some sort of crime, it will be seen from the perspective of this theory that it is the fault of the whole society. That's why such children or minors are committing crimes, and at the same time it is the failure of the society. It is the failure of the society as a whole. So it will investigate this particular theory, that is reformative theory, will investigate what reason is behind such type of, what is the reason behind such type of crimes committed by the minors. I'm just giving here one example of minors. Okay, and they will be treated with humanistic spirit. The minors here will be treated with the humanistic spirit. So they may be given various training like vocational training to bring psychological stability in them. Okay, so they will be rehabilitated so that they can return back to the healthy lifestyle, so that values or let's say moral values can be infused in them. So punishment here will be given, and it will not give exemption from the punishment, this particular theory, reformative theory. But the motive behind the punishment will be to educate and to discipline the criminal or the offender. Punishment will be given, but the punishment, the motive behind the punishment will be to educate and to discipline the criminal or the offender. Okay? So there are certain criticism also as far as this reformative theory is concerned. The practical benefits are questionable. So this is coming under the criticisms of the reformative theory. The practical benefits are questionable. So if the punishment is lessened in the name of reformative theory, then the criminals will be encouraged more to do such crimes. This theory is so, we can say, philosophically motivated that many practical things were ignored in this philosophy. So the practical benefits are always questionable as far as this particular theory is concerned, that is reformative theory, according to the critics. So if the punishment is lessened in the name of reformative theory, then the criminals will be encouraged more to do such crimes. Another point, one of the criticisms is crime as a habit. Okay, so if the tendency to commit the crime is a habit of the offender, then the reformation process will be very problematic to be applied practically, in a practical sense. So in the name of reformation, the punishment of the offender may be lessened. But if it is a habit of the offender to commit crime time and again, then the reformative lessening of the punishment, it will not work practically. It will not work practically. So the name of reformation, the punishment of the offender may be lessened. But if it is a habit of the offender to commit crime time and again, then the reformative lessening of the punishment will not work practically. The third point, the third criticism, we will discuss imbalances of impoverished society. So the crimes are also committed due to impoverished society, due to poverty-stricken conditions. Like a person to financially help his or her family may commit theft crime or stealing of things, etc. So in the name of reformation, one or two persons may be reformed. But what about the whole society? So what about the whole society when it is poverty stricken? So perhaps the true reformation, according to me, will be a collective approach to raise the financial standard of the whole society. Okay, then only such type of challenges, we can meet such challenges wisely. We can face such challenges wisely. Now, the fourth point here to be discussed, retributive theory. Retributive theory. Now, retributive, the term or the meaning of it is revenge or vengeance. So, it is based on social instinct of revenge. So, you may say, what do we mean by social instinct of revenge? Social instinct of vengeance. Okay. So, if you think a person has, let's say, has done something wrong with you, it is the human instinct. It is the human instinct that will work here. And what is that human instinct? And it will be quite natural to have the feelings of revenge or vengeance. This is quite natural. So, if a person commits crime, that person must go through punishment as per the intensity of the crime he or she has committed. Okay? So, as long as the revenge is not fulfilled, the person must be punished according to this retributive theory. As long as the revenge is not fulfilled, according to this retributive theory, the person must be punished. So it is a social collective instinct. If a person beats me, I will have the tendency to beat that person. And this is quite natural. It's a natural instinct we are having. If a person commits murder, give that person death penalty. So this theory is entirely based upon revenge, vengeance. Okay. So punishment. So these are some of the criticisms here. We will go through some criticisms of the retributive theory. Punishment as end, not as means to an end. Okay, one of the, we can say, drawbacks of this retributive theory. It discussed punishment as end, not as means to an end. Now, what do we mean by this? One of the drawbacks of this theory is that it thinks punishment is the act, is the end. One of the drawbacks of this theory is that it thinks that punishment is the end. That is, if a punishment is given for the crime, the whole problem is solved. Let me cite one example here. Like, for example, if a person is jailed, or if a person is, let's say, imprisoned, that person has been given punishment, let's say for 2 years. Now, after 2 years, when this particular person will come out of the jail, he will be more equipped to commit crimes. How to avoid punishments, how to escape from the police, and so on. Okay, so here the punishment is necessary, but it cannot be treated as an end. Okay, the end must be reformation of that person, according to many critics. Punishment can be considered as only one of the means to reach to the end, which must be reformation. But this theory, that is retributive theory, is not supporting this. It is more into vengeance or revenge, at the same time upholding vengeance and revenge. Okay, it is upholding vengeance and revenge. So, eye for an eye. This particular theory is based on this philosophy, which is not based on modern ethics or modern mindset. It is not a civilized approach, we can say, eye for an eye. So there is no higher objective from the sociological perspective in this theory. Retributive theory is outmoded, we can say. It is totally outmoded or outdated, we can say. Certain criticisms are there, like, for example, purpose of punishment. It is missing here. What is the purpose of punishment? It is completely missing here. So revenge is uncivilized in nature. There is no doubt regarding this. So here the purpose of the punishment is for taking revenge only, is for taking vengeance only, eye for an eye. And what will be the consequence of it? Eye for an eye. And what will be the consequence? If it is only for eye for an eye, it will make the entire society blind. So it is completely based on old ethical grounds, we can say, which are outmoded, which are outdated in nature. Nowadays, we are gravitating towards more sociological ideas of punishment. Here the criminal is totally, ignored. Okay, the criminal is totally ignored. Why? The criminal or the offender committed the crime. Why the criminal or the offender committed the crime? Whether he or she belongs to an impoverished society or having, let's say, psychological trauma, etc. Okay, are the things which are ignored here. Okay, criminal here, he or she is totally ignored, and background circumstances are also ignored. Okay, what are the background circumstances? Whether that person committed the crime due to impoverished, due to poverty or not. So this background circumstances, these things are avoided. Whether that person committed the crime due to poverty or not. So these things are avoided here. Okay. So the last theory to be discussed here is expiatory theory. EXPIATORY, expiatory theory. So it means to atone, to make pure again, atonement, to make pure again, or let's say, and be pure again, atonement. So it is based on confession. Okay, based on confession. Bible is giving much importance to this confession of Christianity. So the approach here in this expiatory theory is having religious backgrounds, or we can say religious ideals, that if a person has committed a particular crime, if the offender regrets or confess after committing the crime, and at the same time confess about the crime, okay, or regret about the crime, then that person will become pure again. That person will become pure again, according to this particular theory, according to this expiatory theory. So punishment here will be treated as a proper compensation for wrong. Punishment here, as far as this particular theory is concerned, from the perspective of this theory, punishment here will be treated as a proper compensation for wrong. So if you have accepted that you have committed the wrong, it means you have become pure again. So this theory is entirely based on moral principle, which we cannot prove legally. The moral principle we cannot prove legally, okay? Like a lot of Hindu laws, like Manusmriti, and we are having biblical confessions, etc., are having such type of elements of expiatory theory. So this theory is entirely based on old religious or ethical principles. Now there are certain criticisms also regarding this expiatory theory. Now it is based on moral principles outside of law. This expiatory theory, it is based on moral principle outside of law. Mens rea as basis is ignored. Like, what was the intention behind committing the crime? It has been ignored here in this particular theory, in expiatory theory. Here the punishment, we can say, is based on the act of the crime. Okay, here completely the punishment is based on the act of the crime. Okay, so mens rea as basis, it is ignored here. The intention behind committing the crime, it has been ignored here. Okay, thank you.